In a moment, we have with us Harvard-educated psychotherapist Peter Woodbury to join us and talk about the 20th century's most documented psychic, Edgar Cayce. Peter has a bit of a dramatic flair as well. He portrays Edgar Cayce in theater, such as his knowledge of this great psychic, and tonight he visits with the psychic viewpoint in order to share his insights into Cayce's work and methods. Hi, Peter. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us. You were telling us before that you were going to do some traveling. Is this something that are you doing this in conjunction with spreading the message about Edgar Cayce, or was this unrelated type of research you're doing?
No, this is with the Edgar Cayce Center. They probably do about 4 or 5 tours a year, and we go to spiritual sites around the world, and so the focus is, we go to these, like Easter Island, go to Easter Island in Chile, and we're going to see the Moai and just kind of learn about the spiritual traditions of these places. And that's kind of the focus of the area tours. Like we used to go to Egypt, we go to Machu Picchu and Peru, and sacred energy sites around the world.
So let's just briefly go into real quick what ARE is.
Oh, okay. The ARE was founded by Edgar Cayce, and it was founded in 1931, and it's called the acronym is the Association for Research and Enlightenment, and it was Edgar Cayce's hope that he had a number of psychic gifts and abilities, and he gave readings, and he wanted to start a center where like-minded people could learn more about psychic phenomenon, and it's grown to be a international organization where we host about 2 conferences a month, where we have new age folks of all different kind of walks of life that come. Some of them are the well-known folks like Deepak Chopra, and we have Carolyn Mace coming back this year. So folks like that, and then some folks that are lesser known, just coming to share their work and their experiences and kind of what they're doing. It's more in the alternative kind of metaphysical realm, but with the purpose of working towards enlightenment, the kind of spiritual development and growth of the participants.
Understood. And this organization was actually founded by Edgar Cayce himself, correct?
That's right, yes.
Wow, that's okay. So that's amazing. Well, you know what? Who is this guy that we all assembled here to talk about tonight? I mean, where is he from? Who is Edgar Cayce? Can you give us a little bit of biography?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's probably, I don't even know how many, there's probably like 25 biographies written about him, and there's only one that was published in his lifetime. That's called There Is a River. And anyone who's interested in learning more about Edgar Cayce, it's probably a good place to start with his biography, There Is a River. He was born in rural Kentucky, a small town near Hopkinsville, Kentucky, in 1877. His family were sharecroppers, mostly tobacco, and so just kind of humble people. But Edgar Cayce had unusual psychic abilities that he started demonstrating as a child. He could see the energy patterns that surrounded people, what we call auras. He could pick up people's thoughts. He had sort of transcendent communication with spiritual beings like angels. And he could see folks that were in the other realms, deceased people and that sort of thing.
This is what amazes.
So he's got. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, this is what amazes me about Edgar Cayce, because he had all of these psychic gifts, and yet he came from a Protestant background, and it just, I spent a lot of time wondering how he fit, for lack of a better word, all of that weirdness into a stolidly Protestant framework. You know what I'm saying? It's it's interesting to me.
Yeah, he since he was a child, he was reading the Bible, so he was also very interested in the Bible, and he wanted to be a preacher. But the schools where he lived, they only went to something like 7th or 8th grade, so he couldn't get the education that he wanted.
Oh my God!
In order to become a preacher. But his mother was very influential in his life, and she was not a fire and brimstone sort of person at all. She really helped him accept his abilities as being under God. You know, she said, what matters more is what you do with it, not whether it's good or bad in and of itself. Well, and so that's the way he kind of lived.
He certainly had a gift. I mean, it's this guy, he just beggars description, the size and the power of his gift, which leads to my next question. How, once others discovered this gift that Mr. Cayce had, what sort of volume of readings did he do? How many readings did he give?
Well, what happened was he was really trying to just make it as a mainstream young person. You know, when he left Hopkinsville and he went to the nearest town, which was Bowling Green, he just tried to get a job. And one of his strange abilities that he had is that he could sleep on a book. He would retain photographic memory of its contents.
Wow!
And so he slept on the catalog of this bookstore, and he went in and he knew every book they had and where it was, and so they hired him. And so that was the beginning of his career. But then he lost his voice, and he lost his voice for about a year, and they tried everything to try to cure it. And then it was under hypnosis that he was able to speak. And in this process of going, under trance many times, he actually they found out that he could diagnose a condition that he had, and he could prescribe the treatment for it. And then what he said is that it was psychosomatic. It was almost like something was speaking through him that was saying that, he's got a psychosomatic condition. Give him the hypnotic suggestion right now to return the blood flow to normal conditions in his throat. Mm-hmm. And he did that, and he came out and he could speak. And the doctors that had been working with him got the strange idea, what they saw was so weird that they wondered if he might be able to do that for other people. And so that became what were called readings. That they brought them, they put him under trance, and then they would just say the name of these patients that they had. He would go under trance, and then he could diagnose them. He would go through, his readings are like a doctor. He would give pulse, he would give, numbers of what was going on throughout the body, all the system, whether circulatory or, and then he would go to where the problems are, where the stagnations are, and then he would go on to prescribe the treatments for it. And when people would follow these strange protocols, sometimes they would get better.
I was reading a report written by a doctor who witnessed Cayce's ability, and this physician rather rudely used the word illiterate to describe Edgar Cayce, to give people a perspective of how cogently and lucidly and intelligently Edgar Cayce was able to discuss, the mechanics of your disease to you. This is really what blew away the medical establishment. And so this is how the readings themselves got started, right? Through health issues.
Right.
Questions.
There were, you asked earlier how many readings he gave. He kept, at some point, he decided he wanted to start having copies kept of them. So the organization has copies of over 14,000 readings, but he probably gave about another 1,000 before he kept copies. So he probably in total gave over 15,000 readings. 2/3 of those were on health, and then certain people would come by and they said, it started off with health readings, and then people started asking all kinds of questions. So he actually gave readings on 10,000 different subjects.
It's almost as if once the populace, once they discovered that this tool existed, then the whole population just sort of turned and started trying to use it.
Yeah, and it was it was before the internet and all that sort of thing. So his fame, so to speak, only spread by word of mouth. There were a couple articles that were written about him here and there, and then his biography came out, and then he became, the biography became a bestseller, and so then he got some fame. But the fame is really what did him in, because he was told he should only give 2 readings a day.
Right.
And then when his biography came out, he started getting inundated, and it was during World War II. He died in 1945. And he just started giving 8 and 10 readings a day, which just exhausted him, and he eventually died from heart failure.
Oh, and I guess we can only speculate that the volume of readings he did may or may not have contributed to that toll on his body, But it's kind of
the reading. He would get readings about the process of giving readings, and it said 2 or 3 a day max. And so that time in his life, he overdid it. I don't know what it was, I don't know what exactly how come it was taxing on the body. But
this is certainly a lot different than, for example, what myself and my colleagues do at psychicaccess.com. It's way different than what Edgar Cayce is doing, in the sense, like you said, the internet chain it didn't exist in Edgar Cayce's days. I believe he
right.
a lot of these readings via post and all that good stuff. But I can certainly say 14,000 readings is a staggering number of readings, and it's really, really hard to fake anything like that. It's because these readings are widely available, right? I mean, could anybody just buy these?
If you, you can buy them, or if you join the ARE, they're available online. If you join the Association for Research Enlightenment, or edgarcayce.org, it's a membership-based organization,
right.
And once you become a member, you can have access to all the reading.
Yeah, and I tell you, when you read these things, I mean, when I read them, at least, I'm just, there's just one thought that pulses through your head, and it's that, oh my goodness, there's just too much detail here for even the most imaginative human being to make up out of the clear blues, to invent.
No, it's impossible. Yeah, it's impossible for this stuff to have gotten made up. And then sometimes he would, give a reading for somebody, and then 15 years later they'd come back, and the readings would pick up right off where this guy had been before. How could you explain that kind of if it was like memory, just right up. The first thing it would say we've had this body before, recognizing this individual,
sure.
And then it would proceed from where it had left off with the first last reading.
That's amazing. I mean, Edgar Cayce is marvelous on so many levels. Even if you are a strict materialist and just believe in nothing but the senses and physical science, you have to marvel over Cayce just as a freak of nature. This ability, with the photographic memory and all of. But if that weren't enough, now he's the sleeping prophet on top of that. Now, the health issues were sort of the stimulus for getting these readings started, but they, like you said, you mentioned over 10,000 topics that Mr. Cayce touched upon. Ancient civilizations are one of the big topics, especially Atlantis and ancient Egypt. He had a lot to say about these two places. Why these two places? What's the fascination?
Well, the second most popular type of reading that he gave, beside the health readings, were what are called life readings.
Right.
So somebody would come in and kind of, just wonder, what's going on in my life? What strengths and abilities do I have? What should I be doing? Or, what's going on? How come I'm struggling in my marriage or something like that? And then what he would do in a life reading is that he would go back and he said he could access something called the Akashic Records, and then he would draw forward 4 important lifetimes in this person's, kind of life, soul history. He would just talk about kind of what that soul had worked on in these different lifetimes, and they were basically towards kind of reminding the soul, the person in this life, kind of what they had focused on, what strengths and abilities they had, kind of offering them direction and guidance, sometimes about a relationship. If they were asking about their partner, it would show that, where it started, the kind of the struggles they had. Maybe they got along real well in this life, and then in this life they were adversaries, and then how they're trying to work it out in the current life. But you had asked about Atlantis and Egypt. There were probably, I would say, 3 civilizations, ancient civilizations that Cayce said were very high spiritually. He talked about how we came into the earth and that we're spiritual in nature, and we came into this material dimension, and it's not natural for the soul, because the soul is like one with everything, and in here things are separate. And so that was kind of this experiment, which is kind of coming into here. And so there was, in this experiment with separation, we began to develop greed and power and these sorts of non-spiritual qualities. But he said there were three civilizations where we were doing pretty well, where we were maintaining, we were living based on spiritual principles. They said that the first one was in Lemuria, the second one was in Atlantis, and the third one was in Egypt.
Mm-hmm. So these places were spiritual prototypes of what a human civilization could be.
Yes. And then he said each one fell. He said Lemuria was one of the first kind of soul civilizations on Earth. And he said we weren't even very physical back then. He said we were just kind of like thought forms. Mm-hmm. And then he just read that article I was telling you about. I was researching that, because he says Easter Island is a remnant of Lemuria. And the names that people had were like Om, they were like mantras. We were like Om and Yaum and stuff like that. Ah. And so we were much more like vibratory energies, that rather than pure physical forms. But then we got drawn in. Atlantis was a later and kind of more dense time. But we were also working with spiritual laws. But then he said there was a split off. They were called it the children of the law of one, and then the children of Belial. And that brought Atlantis actually down. And Egypt was another time where he said the five races were able to work together in harmony and balance. They were doing a lot of good work with a lot of the ancient Egyptian teachings, which are still around. He says really reflected that. He says most people that you talk to have some kind of deep kind of soul connection to Egypt. When you talk about Egypt to people, it's almost like a soul memory of a time when we got along better.
Yeah, there's something special about ancient Egypt. It doesn't really matter what your personal spiritual background is. We just have a sort of homing, like it's like a beacon a spiritual beacon for us in the pyramids in ancient Egypt. And so these places, and you used the word dense to describe Atlantis, which was interesting, because you said in Lemuria we were less material, and then in Atlantis we're more dense. So we're sort of are we sort of becoming more and more physical as we move from these locales, from Lemuria to Atlantis to ancient Egypt? Are we becoming more real and more there physically?
Yes, more. Well, because at the beginning we were, I guess you could say we were like 90% spiritual and maybe 10% physical. And then we got to be maybe 50-50, and I don't know what we're at now. I'd hate to think, but
we could speculate.
There is Cayce did talk about that. Starting in 1998, there was just this. He talks about these changes that go on in the human physiology. He calls them root races. He said in 1998 was the beginning of this next root race. We at the ARE were kind of looking at what kind of things are they noticing. Is there anything interesting that even science is noticing in the human body? And one of the things they're finding is that phosphorus is becoming more present in the human body than it was, let's say, 50 years ago. And what? We don't know what. But phosphorus is what's in a match. It just means light. So we're hoping that there's some connection with this next root race and phosphorus, and just perhaps they're moving back to being less physical, maybe more light bearing.
That certainly makes a lot of sense to me, because my academic background is from the life sciences, and I happen to know that phosphorus is a vital element in developing energy and giving the body energy to metabolize things. Phosphorus is almost like the currency of the body as far as energy is concerned. So that really makes a lot of sense to me that this element might be associated with a higher sort of spiritual and physical type of mixture than what we're accustomed to now in the modern world.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, it's so interesting about Edgar Cayce because, he had his fingers in so many different pies. We've talked about some of the health issues that he dealt with, and I would like to get to have expand on that in a few minutes. But then he also had access to this intricate cosmology. He had a lot to say about the origin of humanity, and
oh yeah, that's my favorite subject.
That's your favorite subject.
Yeah.
I see. And is there any particular reason why you have an affinity for that? I guess what you call them, the life readings?
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess as a kid, I was always interested in. I liked Aesop's fables. I liked teaching stories, and I've always been interested in like creation stories. How
right.
people make meaning, and then kind of finding the similarities in the different creation mythology, and then Cayce had his own. And then to me, it just, I think we all kind of have this intuitive kind of barometer that helps us decide for ourselves if something makes sense or not.
Right.
And there's, with Cayce's work, especially his cosmology, that just resonates with me. Like, it's like, I like to think that I can bring my brain to the new age, that I don't just have to take stuff on blind faith, that you're allowed to think through stuff and think, does this make sense? Does this kind of have some kind of resonance? And for me, it has, For me, it's,
absolutely.
I did a lot of searching before coming to Cayce, and I just found like it was a great way of synthesizing a lot of different information.
I think a lot of us take comfort, myself included, from this idea that there were antecedents of us before, that, there was a me before in Lemuria, that I existed in Atlantis and ancient Egypt, and, maybe even I'll continue to exist beyond that. And because of that, then, now I really need to watch my behavior and how I treat other people because, now I'm coming to terms with my own immortality. That's the thing that really comforts, I think, a lot of people. With Edgar Cayce. Now, he also had much to say. I mean, and this is what fascinates me about this gentleman, is because he taught Sunday school. I mean, I'm a Southerner, like Edgar Cayce is, and so it's hard for me sometimes to, mix metaphysics with my Southern roots, especially my Protestant background. But Edgar Cayce actually had a lot of commentary about Jesus Christ and the Essenes, who were a sect of Jews who lived during the time of Jesus. Can you tell us some of the observations and insights he made into Jesus in that group?
Well, that's another one of my favorite subjects.
Nice.
He takes Jesus and he takes him out of just mere Christianity, and he makes Jesus into like a universal figure. Even in his incarnation as Jesus, there are those lost years from 13 to 30.
Right.
And Cayce goes into what was going on at that time. And like you said, he was born, the story, that I was raised with is that, Joe and, Joseph and Mary are just like two shepherds, and somehow they have this kid who turns out to be, the great prophet, and it goes about, teaching everybody and changing the world.
Right.
And I remember I thought that story, it made me feel like, God, I'm chopped liver, man. He did get born to shepherds, and he's like leading the world. And my parents are halfway, I'm more educated, and I'm not half that. But Cayce's story is that, his birth was prepared for by these Essenes. And the word Essene means expectant. That they expected that the prophecies of the Messiah indwelling in the world were going to be fulfilled. And so they prepared for that. They built this whole structure. And with astrology and astronomy and, understanding the stars. And Cayce goes into the Immaculate Conception of Mary, and it's like his stories about it are so detailed, and they're fascinating. He goes into like there wasn't just one virgin pregnant. There were 12 of them, and they didn't know which one. They're like, heck, we knew it was going to be in that exception. Maybe some of them weren't immaculate. I don't know. They were 12. And then he says that like the story goes, that the Archangel Gabriel identifies Mary. And then, Jesus is born. He's taught by this Essene sect. He's reminded of who he is. And from 13 to 30, when a Jewish boy would have a bar mitzvah and get prepared for marriage, that was not Jesus's calling. So they took him to India. They think he spent about 4 years in India, and he learned all the Vedas, and he learned the Bhagavad Gita. He learned the Hindu religion, or reminded himself of it. Mm-hmm. And then he went to Persia, where he had in a past life been part of Zoroastrianism. And he was reminded of the teachings there. And then he went back to Egypt, and Cayce said that in a previous lifetime, he had been the architect of the Great Pyramid. Wow. And that one of the main experiences that you gain in the King's Chamber there is where they have the Chamber of the Open Tomb, where they have the sarcophagus. There's two small entryways into the King's Chamber that archaeologists have thought must be air ducts. And Cayce says, no, those aren't air ducts. Those point towards stargates. And the initiate would be in the sarcophagus, and the soul would leave directed through that opening, mm-hmm. and would either go to something like Arcturus and leave this known universe for 3 days and come back in through Polaris, I think. Wow. And come back to the body. And that's what, Jesus' mission was to try to teach the souls that had kind of gotten so material to remind them of their spiritual origins. And the Great Pyramid was one of those initiatory or remembering structures. And so he went back to Egypt and reinitiated himself in what he had created. And then he comes into Israel to basically teach not just the Old Testament, mm-hmm. but he's really incorporating world religion. So he's bringing a much broader perspective about God and who we are than any single religion. I remember just all of that. And then there's just, he goes into beautiful stories about some of the miracles that Jesus performed. Since Cayce in his waking state was so Christian, that the readings about Christianity are one of the main ones. That was because Cayce and his friends were Christian. They were curious about that. Right. And so I think if Cayce had been Buddhist, they would have focused on Buddha, the one that you practice.
Yes.
So that was the focus.
That's what I like about, as you mentioned, his comments about Jesus always place him within this larger pantheon of a universal spirituality, something that we can, something that speaks to all of us, which is, unfortunately, I think in a lot of modern faces of Christianity, we don't see that spiritual generosity. Do you see? It's all very selfish and egotistical. You have to do it, my way or the highway. Right. And here, Edgar Cayce is making this a universal, making Jesus a universal participant in all of the world's religions. Now, Edgar Cayce himself was a mover and a shaker in ancient Egypt. Am I right about that?
Yes. He was. It was probably one of his most spiritual lifetimes, where he was a priest named Rata.
Right.
Who had a king. It was before pharaohs. They had a king, and the king was sort of the ruler of the economic world of the country. And then Rata was the high priest, and he was the overseer of the spiritual. Back then they were equally as important.
Right.
And so he and this king worked together on ruling the country. It was quite an involved story, but apparently when he passed away from that lifetime, he was told that he had entered the earth plane, that he didn't have to reincarnate. Cayce added something to kind of harm on reincarnation. He says that we travel in soul groups, and that he, as a member of a soul group, didn't want to just move on without his soul group also kind of transcending the earth. So he went back in. He chose to reincarnate. And then he had a lifetime. One of the things he says is that you carry these soul attributes with you. So when he was Rata, he was highly psychic. And that stayed with him. So when he incarnated in early America, he was a fellow named James Bainbridge. But James Bainbridge, born very psychic, got seduced by kind of selfishness and became a riverboat gambler. He could see people's cards, and he seduced women like crazy. And so, when he passed away from that lifetime, the lesson, what he was told is, your consciousness fell then. He said that sin is basically selfishness when we gain at somebody else's cost. And he said that's why Edgar Cayce had to go into trance. He said, like, Rata could have given you a reading in waking state. You could have walked into Rata, and he would have looked at you, and he could have told you everything about your health. He could have given you your past lives. But since Cayce had misused that ability as James Bainbridge, it was taken from his conscious control. And that's why he had to go into a trance state to be able to give reading.
And that may be, and I'm speculating here, that also may be why he never really improved his financial position with these readings either.
Oh, yeah, he had, he's considered the father of holistic medicine because of the mind, body, spirit. And a lot of his readings were about the mind-body connection. And he said that for himself, he says, in readings he would say, Edgar Cayce associates money with evil. And so he's never going to be rich. If you connect money with evil, you're not going to draw it to you.
Right. A lot of books have sprung up about Edgar Cayce. He's almost an industry in and of himself, and yet the man himself, ironically enough, lived and died in very modest means. I believe he was a photographer by profession, wasn't he?
Yes.
That just blows my mind that someone who can do all the marvelous things that he did, put bread in his mouth by being a photographer. That really, I think, says a lot about Mr. Cayce right there.
Well, he knew that he couldn't use his psychic ability for personal financial gain. It was just like intuitive in him. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, if he would give a reading, he would go unconscious. He said, he would make a joke. He says, I've given thousands of readings. I've never heard one. And so he would be out. But his own father, there's stories about his dad was a kind of a rogue. And when his dad was thinking any way to make money. So when he heard his son could do these trance things, he said, hey, son, the neighbor's not feeling so good. Let's they put you under trance. And anybody could do it. He was very highly hypnotizable. It's just dad would put him under trance. As soon as he was under, he'd take out the newspaper, and he'd say, all right, who's going to win the first horse race? Who's going to win the second? And what Cayce would do in these trance readings is that he would see the horses, and he says, well, Lucky Seven's the favorite. But Lucky Seven hurt his ankle this morning. He's not going to, he's barely going to be lucky if he finishes, whatever this other one, horse is looking good. And so, the father was making money off of these bets. But Cayce says when he would wake up from any type of reading that was used for selfish gain, he would have a really bad headache. And he eventually found out what his father was doing, and very disillusioned. He eventually, so many people exploited him, he stopped giving readings for a while. He didn't want to.
Sure.
He moved from Kentucky to Selma, Alabama, and just wanted to be a church-going photographer. But then his son burnt his eyes playing with the flash powder. The old way they used to take pictures is you had to make like a little explosion with the flash powder.
Right.
And
what the thing, and it would go poof.
Yeah, and what little 4-year-old boy isn't going to love that? So he was playing with it and dropped a match into the whole can of it, and it exploded and burnt his face and burnt one of his eyes. And the little boy, Hugh Lynn asked his dad, give a reading, because the doctor said he's going to lose one eye, maybe both. And through the readings, both of his eyes were saved. It was a strange treatment that was prescribed, but that got Cayce doing readings again in Alabama. And that's where they got this woman involved who was named Gladys Davis, who became the became the transcriptionist. And that's when he started keeping copies of the readings.
Now,
that's the 14,000 readings we have. They started with Gladys Davis writing them down in Selma, Alabama.
oh, so up until this point, up until Cayce had gotten disillusioned and his son had gotten blinded, up until this point, nothing had been archived.
No. So that's where about 1,000 readings were given before he started keeping copies. Like that when he decided with his wife that they were going to start getting readings again, they learned from the mistakes. And then he asked his wife if she would be the only person to conduct the readings, and then they decided to hire a stenographer. And it's a funny story because they went through their church and asked, let it be known, and then they had like an audition where like 5 young women came in to practice, to see who would get the job. And the way that they auditioned these girls is that he did a reading. They turned the light back on her. Gladys Day was the only one left in the room. The other girls ran out of there.
They got spooked.
They got spooked, and so she stayed with them. She was like a daughter. She stayed with them their whole life, and she stayed at the AREs, probably the ARE till she passed away.
Now, well, before we start talking more about some of the health-oriented readings, so Edgar Cayce was approached by some geologists or some prospectors for people looking for minerals and oils too, right?
Yes, yeah. Those are some of the saddest. It was a hard time for him. He wanted to get. His dream was because he probably just like today, most people don't go to a psychic the first thing when they're sick. They go to their doctor, and then when the doctors give up on them, they go to psychics. And it was the same thing then. So the people that were asking for readings were on their deathbed sometimes, and the treatments that were prescribed, a lot of times these people couldn't get the treatments. And so some folks were dying that Cayce thought, he wanted to give this a shot. So his dream was to open up a hospital, but he didn't have the money for that. And so then the reading said, as long as if you use this source for money that's going to be helpful to people, it will work. But he said, everybody's got to be on board. Well, so he goes to Texas, and who's going to get all these guys drilling for oil to be thinking that they're going to use this for good causes? So it's just one disaster after another. And the stories were about how cutthroat those people are. They might find some, and then all the equipment will be sabotaged and stuff like that. So it's a real rough community down there around drilling for oil. He was like a babe in the woods.
Yeah, he probably shouldn't have been around those types of fellows, should he?
Yeah, and then I guess for a while he just wasn't with his family, and his son had to come and get him. It was like a failure time for him in his life. But anytime he was used for money, there were also readings given that Blackbeard used to hang out here in Virginia Beach, and that he buried one of his treasures in what's now this park. And so his sons were trying to get these readings so they could find the treasure. They never found anything.
That's very interesting to me because I'm in North Carolina, and Blackbeard, is a big deal around here. He's a North Carolina.
Oh yeah.
He's a Tar Heel pirate. I might add he was executed by a Virginian governor, but we won't go into all of that here.
Yeah.
And he was supposed to have left a lot of treasure around the area. And it's that.
Yeah. He said he liked it up here. It's not far.
Well, you said before that Mr. Cayce's prescriptions for some cures that were kind of weird or different. Can you give us some examples of some people who were sick and Edgar Cayce prescribed them treatment that maybe was at odds with medicine? Or
oh, sure, lots of times. Like his wife had tuberculosis.
Oh wow!
And the main treatment that he had was for her to breathe the fumes in a charred oak keg of apple brandy.
What?
And the fumes of apple brandy were like, it's like, alcohol is an antiseptic.
Okay.
And so just breathing in those fumes into the lungs would slowly help her lungs come back to health. But there were other treatments that she needed, and part of it would involve heroin. So it was part of one of the substances that she would take. I don't know how much of it was.
Right.
Was involved heroin. And then for his son, when he lost his eyes, part of the treatment that he prescribed was tannic acid to be applied over the eyes. And the doctors said, that's crazy. They just said he's going to lose his eye anyway, so you can put tannic acid if you want. But tannic acid is the acid that you use to soften leather, like they clean with tan leather.
Right.
You use tannic acid. So that was something they were very surprised
and
worked. Yeah, and then some of the things that he prescribed are now mainstream. But they won't give him credit for it.
Right.
He talked about gold and silver. They accelerate the healing from burns, and he gave those readings, like in 1901 or 1902. Well, lo and behold, if you go to a burn unit today, they use gold. Gold is too expensive. They use silver to accelerate healing. But they say, we discovered that in 1945 or 1930. They don't want to say that we can document that well before it was quote unquote discovered.
Right.
It was in Cayce readings. So nobody in science or doctors is going to give credence to say they're not going to get any funding if they say, well, why are you doing this? Well, there was a psychic we want to check his stuff out.
Right.
So that's unfortunate. That worked.
That is unfortunate, because I think this is one of those areas of Edgar Cayce's life that would most win over the skeptics, because he had such successes with healing people. He healed so many people. For instance, I read some comments that he made, or some observations he made regarding psoriasis and it being connected to leaky gut syndrome. Which
I'm a witness. I got healed of psoriasis from his from following that protocol, the leaky gut syndrome. Yeah.
No, because I'm not even sure whether or not modern quote unquote conventional medicine understands the mechanics behind psoriasis, but I think they want to say it's an autoimmune disorder. They want to link it to the immune system.
Well, beware of the science with autoimmune. They call everything autoimmune. Autoimmune, it just means your body is really angry and it's starting to attack itself. It means you're really toxic. Cayce's, he talked a lot about the importance of the gut. And then what he said with psoriasis is that it's just toxins are passing through the intestinal lining, getting back in the blood, and they're getting released through the skin. So you have to take these teas. You have to change your diet and work with healing your gut. And I did it. And like you were saying before, medical science considers psoriasis uncurable.
Yeah.
And probably the best selling book, if you go on Amazon, the best selling book on psoriasis is this guy named John Pagano, who created a whole business, a practice in Pennsylvania, curing people of psoriasis using Cayce's protocol. He passed away about 2 years ago, but he's healed thousands of people just getting them to follow the protocol. And he's got the evidence. He shows you all the pictures. He shows you how it works and how to go about doing it.
Well, that certainly makes a lot of sense to me, because Cayce, he was active when? Early 1900s, right? You say he died around the end of World War II, thereabouts. Now, guts back in those days they probably accepted a lot healthier food than guts in this day and age. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm driving at here?
Yeah.
One can speculate on the amount of, illnesses that can be traced to just a really, really terrible diet. Edgar Cayce would have a field day working in the modern age.
Oh yeah, he was just beginning to start talking about issues with pesticides and preservatives, and the overuse of antibiotics. That was just coming in, and he was starting to, like when he talked about eating food, he said better to eat from an animal that gets to choose what it eats than one that's being fed.
Huh. And now this,
that like a wild animal gets to pick its food, and he says, a lot of these domesticated. Like, you have cows and stuff eating stuff that's not what they would normally eat. Like, even, I guess, bad cow disease is caused by the crazy stuff they fed cows.
I never really thought of my nutrition that way. That my prey, it would pick its own feed. But now that I ponder that idea, I certainly would rather eat an animal that picked and chose its own food than one that was sort of jammed in with 1,000 others of its kind and held in really unsanitary, unhygienic conditions. So.
Oh yeah, well you see that with like eggs. You see with these chickens that are real free range and are out there eating whatever they want. Their yolks are so yellow. Cayce says, the yellow is the B vitamins, and then these other ones, the mass-produced chickens, their yolks are almost white.
Huh. Not to mention the fact that a lot of our food products, animals and vegetables, are being modified genetically and shot up full of hormones and things of that nature. So, this is really, really interesting to me, because while Edgar Cayce was spelling out his origins of humanity, while he was giving life readings and telling people what their function was in Atlantis and Lemuria and ancient Egypt, he was also, at the same time, this man has to have the most productive sleep of anyone I've ever seen. He's also at the same time fathering holistic health and understanding how the health of a human being is interwoven into all of his environmental factors. It's just amazing to me.
Well, the most recent biography, the biographer was given access to the confidential record, like the names of the people who got reading. Like, I guess after someone's deceased, it's no longer private. And, we found that he was intimately involved with Nikola Tesla, the inventor.
Yeah.
And a couple of years ago, I guess when I first moved here, I was at the desk, and this guy comes from the Tesla Museum, and he's saying, Tesla left Edgar Cayce patents. In his will, he's got these patents that are, he said, I'm going to leave them to Edgar Cayce. So they came to talk about these patents that have been left for him. But they were, Tesla had heard about Cayce and was very interested in this source. And Tesla was trying to work on, seems like the vibration what's different about somebody that's in love, that has, why do those people live longer than other people? And so he was trying to create that vibration so that he could put it into people. Tesla put a lot of electricity into himself. And Cayce talked a lot of, he had 2 battery appliances that were for helping people heal. He was talking about that we're electromagnetic being. And a lot of his energy medicine was about balancing the body out. But, Tesla got readings. He also went to the White House secretly and gave 2 readings for the president at that time.
Wow.
And his reading said that those readings that he gave for the president led to the foundation of what we've done, the League of Nations, which we now know of the United Nations.
Well, Edgar Cayce should actually be included in textbooks and history books. It's a pity that he's not, and probably never will be, at least in this culture.
And I think the purpose of his life, though, was to be humble. Because I think he had lifetimes where his ego got in the way, and he just seemed to resist in this lifetime any kind of fame or any kind of special attention. He didn't really want any of that.
I can only imagine what a partnership between Edgar Cayce and Nikola Tesla would yield. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I don't think society is really ready for Mr. Cayce's ideas or Tesla's ideas, because they are so healing. Because there's so much money to be made off of sickness and suffering and misbehavior. Peter. Unfortunately, hospital, because Edgar Cayce did make his hospital, but it floundered due to financial reasons. He couldn't get the financial traction to make that hospital. After I think it lasted for his life, and then after he passed away is when the hospital crumbled. Correct?
Well, the hospital lasted just 2 years. He got the backing of these stockbrokers,
Right.
but then they were infighting. Once he opened the hospital, he started giving more readings for the people in the hospital, and these stockbrokers were getting readings from Edgar Cayce where he was helping them interpret their dreams, and through the interpretation of the dreams, they were making money in their investments. So that created a tension that they weren't getting more readings, and then the stock market crash hit. So the hospital closed in 1930. It was open from like 28 to 30.
Okay, so that's when
then the ARE was founded in 31, and ARE it continues to this day, and it's on the same site. They still have the hospitals there. It's like a historic site.
So the Association for Research and Enlightenment, that's the ARE, that's your organization, and I can find you guys at edgarcayce.org. That's the URL for that.
That's right. Yeah.
Definitely, you guys listening want to visit www.edgarcayce.org, because there you'll find all sorts of articles, a wealth of material and information about Edgar Cayce. We've only scratched the surface tonight in this broadcast. And also the tours. One thing that impressed me about the association is that you guys organize these really awesome tours to exotic locales like Easter Island, Egypt as well, Machu Picchu, and wow, I just can't think of a better vacation than to take an ARE tour to ancient Egypt and see these marvelous structures and learn about Edgar Cayce's interpretation for them.
Right, and then we meditate at these places and feel the energy, and then it's a group of there's small groups, probably sometimes between 10, 20, 30 people. And, we do dream study together. We do past life regressions during the trip. So it's just, I love, I think they make me a tour leader because I went on so many trips when I was a tourist.
Well,
I probably went on 10 as a tourist, and then they say, hey, come up here, why don't you start leading them? And so I've probably led about just as many, about 10 now.
Well, we're actually getting into the final minutes of our time together here, unfortunately. But I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about you personally. Like,
sure,
I read on the ARE's website that you're involved in like a stage production of Edgar Cayce's life. What's that?
That's right. When I was in college and after college, I was I was in theater, and I was pondering whether I wanted to put both feet in that profession. And so for 2 years, I worked in study. I was in London and New York and in Washington, D.C., training and doing plays. And eventually, my parents were psychiatrists, so I was always interested in psychology. And psychology kind of drew me to theater. I liked not just understanding people, but then trying to portray their characters. But then I kind of put it aside, and I just went into, I'm a clinical social worker, so I do counseling. But then when the ARE was going to celebrate its 75th anniversary, they wanted to do a stage production of what was then called The Freak. It was an off-Broadway play that had been made about Edgar Cayce. And so they found out that I had this background, and so they had me direct and act in it. But it changed. We ended up just doing it. It was like we now call it an evening with Edgar Cayce, where just Edgar Cayce comes out and just tells the story of his life and talks about the times that we're living in, and it answers questions from the audience at Edgar Cayce.
And you,
I love
Cayce, right?
Yeah, I play him. Yes, I love doing it.
Well, I want to ask you this, because you are in social work. You're a therapist, and you deal with people. Do you use any of Edgar Cayce's techniques in helping your patients recover from their traumas and challenges?
Oh yeah. My practice is mostly conventional, like therapy. Like I work with insurances, so I might not call it the things that Cayce calls it. He believes that we create our world through our mind, because our mind is spirit is the cause, mind is the builder, and your life is the result. And the field of psychology is called cognitive behavioral therapy. And so I would say I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist, but it's the same thing as Cayce's working on how people create a story about their life and how they feel about it, and how that optimism begets optimism and pessimism begets pessimism. So I try to work with people on what it is they're building in their consciousness. And then as a result, I've made a subspecialty in hypnosis. Because of my fascination with the stories about I could tell you stories about just stuff that would happen while he was under hypnosis. He would speak foreign languages. He levitated. Just all these kind of stuff that was hard for me to believe. So I've studied hypnosis for the past 5 or so years, and then now I teach the hypnosis and past life regression course at the ARE.
That is absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you what. I would love to go under hypnosis. Let's say that I have a smoking habit or some problem in my life, and I wanted to get your help, to get you to hypnotize me. Is that possible? Do you work mainly through insurances, or do you do private bookings as well?
No, I do both. I do. I've found that hypnosis is a very powerful tool, and it's something I use in my practice to try to help people move through things. And Cayce put it interestingly. He said hypnosis will cure any condition as long as it's not karmic. And so you could, that's what I think. The talking therapy works through the karmic stuff, and the hypnosis will wipe out anything that's not karmic. So it's almost like I like working with them both together. Basically what he's saying is that sometimes we're dealing with things that we need to learn from that are there for a reason, right, and hypnosis is just going to knock those out.
Well, how would I book a session with you if I were interested in a hypnotherapy session?
Well, you could call me or go. You want me to give you my number? Would that help?
Sure, that would be great. That would be great.
Yeah, you can reach me at 757-217-7159.
Oh, awesome. And you're also available at the Association for Research and Enlightenment.
Yeah, you can just, get on the website there, and then just, you can go to the contact us and just say, I didn't catch this number, but I'd like to be in touch with Peter Woodbury, and then I'll get you the email, and then I'll call back whoever's interested.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. You heard it right there. Contact Peter at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, or call the number that he just recited, and you can be the beneficiary of some of the techniques that Edgar Cayce used, the trance and the hypnosis, and you can unlock a marvelous power, peace in your life as well. Peter, I would really like to thank you for joining us tonight on the Psychic Viewpoint. This has been a lovely, lovely exploration of Edgar Cayce's life. Thank you.
Oh, good. You're very welcome. Thanks for having me on, and I've enjoyed my time with you.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Peter.
Hello, my name is Rez Miranda. If you're having relationship, career, or life issues, I'm inviting you to experience what it's like to have access to professional, highly accurate psychics and spiritual advisors you can trust to care and help you. Register now to get your free 6-minute reading by telephone or chat. Get answers, get access, psychic access, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. PsychicAccess.com.
More is what you do with it, not whether it's good or bad in and of itself. Well, and so that's the way he kind of lived.
He certainly had a gift. I mean, if this guy, he just beggars description, the size and the power of his gift, which leads to my next question. How, once others discovered this gift that Mr. Cayce had, what sort of volume of readings did he do? How many readings did he give?
Well, what happened was he was really trying to just make it as a mainstream young person. When he left Hopkinsville and he went to the nearest town, which was Bowling Green, he just tried to get a job. And one of his strange abilities that he had is that he could sleep on a book. He would retain photographic memory of its content.
Wow!
And so he slept on the catalog of this bookstore, and he went in and he knew every book they had and where it was, and so they hired him. And so that was the beginning of his career. But then he lost his voice.
Wow!
sacred energy sites around the world.
So let's just briefly go into real quick what ARE is.
Oh, okay. The ARE was founded by Edgar Cayce, and it was founded in 1931, and it's called the acronym is the Association for Research and Enlightenment, and it was Edgar Cayce's hope that he had a number of psychic gifts and abilities, and he gave readings, and he wanted to start a center where like-minded people could learn more about psychic phenomenon. And it's grown to be a international organization where we host about 2 conferences a month, where we have New Age folks of all different kind of walks of life that come. Some of them are the well-known folks like Deepak Chopra, and we have Carolyn Mace coming back this year. So folks like that, and then some folks that are lesser known, just coming to share their work and their experiences and kind of what they're doing. It's more in the alternative kind of metaphysical realm. Thoughts. He had sort of transcendent communication with spiritual beings like angels, and he could see folks that were in the other realms, deceased people and that sort of thing.
This is what amazes.
So he's got. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, this is what amazes me about Edgar Cayce, because he had all of these psychic gifts, and yet he came from a Protestant background. And it just, I spent a lot of time wondering how he fit, for lack of a better word, all of that weirdness into a stolidly Protestant framework. You know what I'm saying? It's interesting to me.
Yeah, he since he was a child, he was reading the Bible, so he was also very interested in the Bible, and he wanted to be a preacher. But the schools where he lived, they only went to something like 7th or 8th grade, so he couldn't get the education that he wanted.
Oh my God!
In order to become a preacher. But his mother was very influential in his life, and she was not a fire and brimstone sort of person at all. She really helped him accept his abilities as being under God. She said, what matters.
In a moment, we have with us Harvard-educated psychotherapist Peter Woodbury to join us and talk about the 20th century's most documented psychic, Edgar Cayce. Peter has a bit of a dramatic flair as well. He portrays Edgar Cayce in theater, such as his knowledge of this great psychic, and tonight he visits with a psychic viewpoint in order to share his insights into Cayce's work and methods. Hi, Peter. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us. You were telling us before that you were going to do some traveling. Is this something that are you doing this in conjunction with spreading the message about Edgar Cayce, or was this unrelated type of research you're doing?
No, this is with the Edgar Cayce Center. They probably do about 4 or 5 tours a year, and we go to spiritual sites around the world, and so the focus is, we go to these, like Easter Island, go to Easter Island in Chile, and we're going to see the Moai and just kind of learn about the spiritual traditions of these places. And that's kind of the focus of ARE tours. Like we used to go to Egypt, we go to Machu Picchu and Peru, but with the purpose of working towards enlightenment, the kind of spiritual development and growth of the participants.
Understood. And this organization was actually founded by Edgar Cayce himself, correct?
That's right, yes.
Wow, that's okay. That's amazing. Well, you know what? Who is this guy that we all assembled here to talk about tonight? I mean, where is he from? Who is Edgar Cayce? Can you give us a little bit of biography?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's probably, I don't even know how many, there's probably like 25 biographies written about him, and there's only one that was published in his lifetime. That's called There Is a River. And anyone who's interested in learning more about Edgar Cayce, it's probably a good place to start with his biography, There Is a River. He was born in rural Kentucky, a small town near Hopkinsville, Kentucky, in 1877. His family were sharecroppers, mostly tobacco, and so just kind of humble people. But Edgar Cayce had unusual psychic abilities that he started demonstrating as a child. He could see the energy patterns that surrounded people, what we call auras. He could pick up people's